we saw women come in all the time, sometimes by accident, but most of the time on their way to Planned Parenthood, where we would do pregnancy tests or ultrasounds. This is a local problem, and that's the local solution. And in the fall of 2004, we were in our office praying about how we could end abortion in our community and reduce the local abortion numbers. And from that hour of prayer, 40 days just came to us for obvious reasons, how God uses 40 days throughout Scripture not only to bring about change in the culture, but to call his own people back to him. So we did 40 days of prayer, 40 days of fasting, and 40 days of a nonstop, peaceful, 24-hour vigil outside of our local Planned Parenthood abortion facility. That was the first ever 40 Days for Life. It led to a 28% drop in local abortion numbers. But when the campaign was over and we had done a 24-hour vigil for 40 days, we were exhausted. We thought that that was it. It was over and nobody would ever want to do this ever again. And then a group in Dallas called us, and then Green Bay, Wisconsin, and then Charlotte, North Carolina, and we started to see people wanting this campaign that they found out about via internet. And so in the fall of 2007, we decided to launch 40 Days for Life nationally. And David B. Wright and myself had a goal of 20 to 25 cities signing up, being trained by us on how to recruit volunteers, how to deal with the media, how to do something very controversial. And we were in awe when 89 cities signed up for the first ever nationally coordinated 40 Days for Life in the fall of 2007, so much so that the following Lent, during the springtime, people wanted to do another 40 Days for Life. And so that spring, we had 59 cities. And the following fall, we doubled from the first fall, going from 89 cities to 177 cities in just 1 year. And ever since then, we've done a fall campaign and a spring campaign. And like many cities throughout Florida, Tallahassee does have a 40 Days for Life campaign. And Chris, the local leader, is here with her husband. And it has been amazing to see the results come in from across the country. We've had over 3,600 women choose life and confirm to our local volunteers that they chose life at the very last moment when they were walking into that abortion facility. We've had 9 abortion facilities close following one or more 40 Days for Life campaigns, and Tallahassee is extremely ripe for that happening. Tonight, I know that there were 2 abortion facilities in Tallahassee, and now there's 1. There is no reason why this city cannot be abortion-free. That can happen, and I believe it will happen, not only because of the presence on the sidewalk, but more importantly because Open Door is just a few doors down. Now, one of the things I'm always asked about are the 37 abortion clinic workers who have come to us after having a conversion. Because they have this vigil outside of their facility for 40 straight days, and after the first 7 or 10 days, we're just nuts and we're loons, but that wears off after, day 20, and you get to know some of the volunteers, and the local pro-lifers get to know some of the people that work in the industry, and they see your heart. And we've had a number of clinic workers, 37, have conversions and leave their jobs. Now, when I mentioned that we had bought locally the house just next door to Planned Parenthood, that was for obvious reasons, the same reasons you guys have your facility, so that women can come straight over on the day of their abortion and you can give them life-saving alternatives. I never imagined that the director of that Planned Parenthood, somebody who was the 2008 Employee of the Year for Planned Parenthood Houston, Southeast Texas, would walk into my office and have a meltdown after she saw a 13-week-old baby fight for his life and lose it during an ultrasound-guided abortion that happened in her facility. Abby Johnson had never seen an abortion before. She ran the local Planned Parenthood for 8 years. We both got involved on opposite sides of the fence at the same time, she volunteering for Planned Parenthood and me volunteering for the Coalition for Life. And then we were named executive directors of opposing organizations. We had done media interviews against each other. We literally were divided by a wrought iron fence. We had many conversations through the fence and we're always very nice to each other, but I never imagined or did not have the faith to imagine that she would ever have a conversion. But that's what happened after she saw a baby lose his or her life. Somebody that marketed abortion, sold abortion, encouraged abortion, but after participating in abortion had the humility to follow the truth, even though it was not what she expected to see, even though that day, especially for her, the truth hurt when she saw it and she saw what she had been doing. That's the power of an ultrasound machine. And that's the power you have just yards away from your abortion facility. The truth of the reality of life in the womb, but also the love in which that is shared by Heather's and other staff members and volunteers. Truth and love. And it's not an idea on a mountain somewhere, it's a person. And his name is Jesus Christ. And when people encounter him, when they see the beauty and the miracle of the womb, it's attractive. And the truth is irresistible, even in the most difficult circumstances as it was for Abby. And Abby resigned, and Planned Parenthood came after her legally and lost in court, and then sent out a press release, announced to scare her away from the pro-life movement, and that ended up becoming a national media story last November. We were both on the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News, and there were a number of different reports. Some of you were talking about, y'all have seen some of those news stories with her, because her story is so powerful, because it proves that people do change their minds on this issue. It proves what we all hope to believe here tonight, that this really is about one woman, one heart, one mind at a time. Because that's why you have the success that you have, because of that focus on each woman that walks inside of those doors. And the location could not be better. Now, when I was in the 8th grade, no, that was not 4 years ago. And I am 28. I need to verify some of the things before I go on. I do have 4 kids. I'm married. We've been married 7 years, and I'm 28. I just look like I'm 16. But when I was in the 8th grade, I went to a small Catholic school in East Texas. And when you go to a Catholic school in East Texas, 98% of the students are Southern Baptists. And what the world looks at and kind of scratches their head at and calls dysfunctional, Christians call ecumenical. And I remember we had this huge Irish priest. He was 6'5", 300 pounds. He wore a black cassock. He called himself Darth Vader. And the Catholic school at the time was one of the few Christian schools in town, so the Baptist preacher's kid went to our high school. And so he was on the front row, and he was great, and he loved all the priests that taught in the school and everything, but Father Doyle was up there, and he's just huge. He's 300 pounds, he's 6'5", and he's just kind of looking at this young guy, and he says, "Father, I got a question for you. Why do priests wear black?" And we all just looked at him like, this is going to be great. He's going to kill you, and we get to watch it. And everybody just kind of watched it. He said, well, obviously, as you can see, because it makes us look very thin. And he moved on to moral theology or some other topic, and just as if nothing had ever happened. And this was the environment that we had with wonderful priests who spoke out, especially for the sanctity of human life. But I remember hearing a sermon from this particular priest, and it was about a young evangelical pastor who grew up in Germany and shot up through the ranks of academia and went and studied in London, studied in the United States, and then got a very prestigious teaching position in England. His students loved him. He had his whole life ahead of him. He was very much in his comfort zone. All until he got word of the rise of the Nazis in his homeland, and he returned back to Germany to speak out against Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. And after years of doing this, money that he had used to have Jews escaped into Switzerland was traced back to him. And he was captured by the SS, where he was sent to a number of concentration camps, where he ended at Flossenburg. And he was no fool. He knew that a lot of people went into Flossenburg, but not a whole lot of people came out of Flossenburg. And so he prayed in his cell at night, and sure enough, one evening, 2 SS soldiers came to his cell and asked him to come out on the courtyard in front of the concentration camp. And he thought he would be shot by a firing squad because he had seen that done to other prisoners. But they wanted to make an example of this young pastor, and so they put him on a stage and they stripped him down naked. And they pointed at him and they laughed at him and they said, "Let word leave Flossenburg that this is what happens to Christians who speak out against Adolf Hitler." And they hung him in a cold, wet, miserable German concentration camp that legally sanctioned death on those they deemed unwanted. The martyr, of course, is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer's story is extremely inspirational, but to me, the most inspirational part of his story is his initial decision to go back to Germany. Because a friend stopped him and said, "Dietrich, I know you. If you go back to Germany, you're going to get caught up in this mess. You may even lose your life. Why bother?" And Bonhoeffer responded by saying, "I want to do this, and I must do this, because I feel our Lord Jesus Christ would have done nothing less for me." During his time in concentration camps, Bonhoeffer wrote a lot of letters. And in one of the letters he writes, at first they came for the mentally handicapped, and no one said anything. And then they came for the gypsies, and no one said anything. And then they came for the intellectuals, and no one said anything. And then they came for the Jews, and no one said anything. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. The reason you're here tonight, and the reason I'm here tonight, is to not make abortion illegal, it's to make it unthinkable. Because that's what Open Door is doing. And it's also to answer